My brother mocked me for not having kids, saying I'd die alone. When his wife filed for divorce, he tried to move into my home. Instead, I handed him an eviction notice. You know how family gatherings always seem to get a little weird? Like, there's always that one conversation that feels off, like everyone knows it's about to go downhill, but no one knows how to stop it. Yeah, well, that's how my Thanksgiving dinner went last year. It wasn't anything major at first, just the usual family chatter. How's work? How's your partner? Any fun vacation plans? But as the evening wore on and the wine flowed a little more freely, the conversation started veering into less neutral territory. Like clockwork, my brother Nathan steered it right into me. Specifically, my lack of kids. Now, I don't have a problem with people asking about my life choices. But there's a difference between being curious and being condescending. Nathan, with his wife Anna and their 3 kids, always acted like he had the secret formula for life figured out. Apparently, the key to that formula was having kids, settling down, and doing it all by 30. Since I was in my early 30s and still single, child-free, and living my life how I wanted, he had a lot of opinions. He wasn't shy about sharing them. That night, Nathan hit me with the usual. You know, Ryan, you should really consider settling down and having kids. It's not too late. Trust me, you don't want to be one of those people who regrets it later. He said it casually. Like it was just another piece of advice. But the thing was, I'd heard this before. Over and over again. And each time it felt more invasive. I tried to brush it off. I really did. Yeah, I'll keep that in mind, I said, flashing a smile. But Nathan wouldn't let it go. Honestly though, Ryan? He leaned in, a little too eagerly. You will regret it, you know. You'll end up alone just sitting there with your cats when you're old. I'm telling you. You'll be the one sitting at home, watching your friends post pictures of their kids on Facebook, and wondering why you didn't do it sooner. I don't know why it hit me so hard this time. Maybe it was the way he said it, like my entire life had somehow been a mistake, or maybe it was the whole dying alone thing. But something inside me snapped. For a second, I felt my patience running out. I had been the nice guy for way too long, letting Nathan get away with making digs at my choices. It was always just a joke, right? But this time, it wasn't funny. I felt my hands tighten around my wine glass. I'm not really worried about being alone, I said, keeping my tone even, but something in my voice must have changed. I'm just fine, actually. Just because my life doesn't follow the same script as yours doesn't mean it's wrong. The silence at the table was deafening. I could feel the weight of everyone's attention on me now. My mom, sitting across from me, gave me one of those nervous glances she always did when conflict brewed. Anna, Nathan's wife, shifted uncomfortably in her seat, clearly trying to avoid eye contact. Nathan didn't let up. He smirked. You know, Ryan, I'm just trying to be realistic here. I don't want to see you all alone when you're older. I mean, look at me. I've got Anna, I've got the kids. This is the life. This is the right way to do it. I could feel my face flush. Part of me wanted to argue, to lay it all out for him. How I wasn't missing anything. How I was content with the life I'd built. But I didn't, I just let it sit there. What else was there to say? I had tried to explain before, and it never worked. His mindset was so stuck in this traditional family box, he couldn't even begin to understand that some people just don't want the same things. And I wasn't going to waste my breath trying to convince him otherwise. As the evening wore on, I tried to let it go. But Nathan's comment lingered in my mind like an itch I couldn't scratch. You'll die alone, he'd said. It didn't feel like a joke anymore. It felt like a verdict. The weight of it was suffocating. And I couldn't shake the feeling that he was looking at me like I was somehow less than him because I didn't have kids. I went to bed that night with a knot in my stomach. It wasn't the first time Nathan had said something like this. It probably wouldn't be the last. But this time? I felt a shift. Something inside me said, enough. I'd been quiet, passive for too long. Why was I letting him get away with treating my life like it wasn't valid? A week passed, and I still couldn't get the conversation out of my head. I kept telling myself to move on, to let it go. But I couldn't. The more I thought about it, the more I realized something. This wasn't just about kids. This was about respect. Nathan had crossed a line, and for some reason I knew I needed to do something about it. What that something was though, I didn't know yet. But I would. And as it turns out, I didn't have to wait long to find out. Update. A few weeks had passed since that Thanksgiving dinner. I'd done my best to brush off Nathan's comments, chalking them up to his usual tendency to be helpful about my life, but the more I thought about it, the more annoyed I became. It wasn't just the mockery about my personal choices, it was the assumption that because he had kids, his life was somehow superior, more complete, more right. I didn't need his approval, but the way he threw his judgment at me, like I was some sort of failure, really stuck with me. But here's the thing. I'm not the type to pick fights over this stuff. I don't seek drama, And I definitely don't want to cause a rift in the family. So I swallowed it and kept moving forward. Or at least, I tried to. Then came the phone call. It was a Friday night, around 9 p.m. I was sitting on my couch, winding down after a long week of work, when my phone rang. It was Nathan. He wasn't one to call unless it was urgent, so I answered with a slight sense of dread. "Hey man, you got a minute?" Nathan's voice was off, like he wasn't sure how to approach whatever he was about to say. "Yeah, what's up?" I replied, trying to keep it casual, though I had no idea where this was going. "Listen, I need to talk to you about something. Anna and I..." He paused, then took a deep breath. "We're getting a divorce." I'm not going to lie, I was stunned. Divorce? From Nathan and Anna? They were the picture-perfect couple. At least that's how it seemed from the outside. Their house was always spotless, their kids well-behaved, at least when they weren't screaming at the dinner table, and they seemed to have this effortless, happy family thing down to an art. I never expected to hear anything like this from him. "What happened?" was all I could muster. "Stuff's been going on for a while," he said, voice cracking slightly. "I didn't want to say anything before, but Anna and there's just too much. We've been fighting non-stop and, well, she wants out. She's filing for divorce." I sat there for a second, processing what he'd just said. Divorce wasn't exactly a light topic, but Nathan sounded like he was drowning. The reality of it hit me. This was the same Nathan who had mocked my life choices, who'd acted like having a family was the only way to live. And now he was in pieces, and I was supposed to somehow be the rock, the one to pick up the pieces for him. It was strange, unsettling even. "Man, I'm sorry to hear that," I said, trying to keep the sympathy in my voice. Divorce wasn't easy for anyone, let alone when there were kids involved. But as much as I felt for him, I wasn't sure how to react. I had my own life to figure out. "Yeah, thanks," Nathan replied. There was a pause before he continued, his voice quieter. "Look, Ryan, I know this is a lot, but I don't have anywhere to go right now. Anna kicked me out. I'm staying with a friend for now, but it's not working. I can't really afford anything on my own. I'm kind of in a bad spot. Do you think I could stay with you for a little while? Just until I get back on my feet?" My mind raced. My first instinct was to say no. I didn't want to be in the middle of this. I had my own life to worry about, and frankly, I didn't want to let Nathan move into my space, especially after everything that had happened with his comments. But then, another part of me, some part that still cared about family, even when things got messy, wanted to help. I could see how broken he was, and I knew he probably had nowhere else to turn. Divorce wasn't something that people could bounce back from quickly, especially not when kids were involved. But the question kept circling in my head. Did he respect me enough to make this request, or was this just another case of him expecting me to drop everything for him? I didn't know. What I did know was that Nathan wasn't the type to swallow his pride easily. So this must have been really bad if he was calling me for help. I also knew I wasn't going to let him walk all over me again. The boundaries I'd set after the Thanksgiving dinner hadn't just been a one-time thing. I'd stood up for myself, and I wasn't about to let it all slide just because he was in trouble. After a long pause, I replied, trying to sound as neutral as possible. "I don't know, Nathan. You know I'm here for you, but I don't want things to get complicated. I've got my own space, and I've been keeping things the way I like them. This is a big ask." "I know, man," he said quickly. "I get it, I really do, but I promise, it'll only be temporary. I just need a place to crash for a while, and I'll figure it out from there. It's just, everything's falling apart, and I'm barely keeping it together." I could hear the desperation in his voice. It was like he was pleading with me, but not in a way that felt comfortable. It felt more like I was being cornered into saying yes. And the worst part of me was actually considering it. But there was also something gnawing at me. Nathan had this way of asking for favors, this quiet, subtle pressure that made you feel guilty for even considering saying no. He was manipulative in a way I hadn't noticed until now, and that realization made me hesitate even longer. "Let me think about it," I finally said, my voice steady, even though my head was spinning. "I'll call you tomorrow." The next day, I spent hours weighing my options. On the one hand, I knew family was important. On the other, I wasn't a doormat. The more I thought about it, the more I realized something. I couldn't let him just waltz in and treat my home like a temporary fix to his life problems. Not when he had no real respect for me or my choices in the past. I wasn't sure what I was going to do yet, but I knew one thing for sure. Whatever happened next, it wasn't going to be like last time. This time, things were going to be different. Final update. The next few days after Nathan's request were a blur. My mind kept circling around it. I'd spent so much time telling myself that I wasn't going to let him walk all over me again, but every time I thought about his voice, the desperation, the way he needed someone to catch him when he'd fallen, I couldn't help but feel torn. I had always been there for him. I'd been the one who showed up at his house to help after their first baby was born, the one who brought over food when they were sick. I was family after all. But then I'd think back to that Thanksgiving dinner. I couldn't erase the memory of Nathan smirking and mocking my life choices, of him casually tossing out that I'd die alone, because I didn't have kids. That line had been a punch to the gut, and even if I wanted to help him now, I wasn't sure I could just forget about it. I wasn't some charity case for his guilt, and this wasn't just about him anymore. I finally decided to call him back. I wasn't going to leave him hanging indefinitely, but I needed to get a few things straight first. "Hey Nathan," I said, trying to keep my tone neutral but firm. "I've been thinking about your situation, and I want to help you, but we need to set some clear boundaries here. You can stay with me for a bit, but I don't want things to get messy. I've got my own life, and I'm not going to be your emotional sounding board or your babysitter. If you're staying here, I need you to respect my space and my rules. Can we agree on that?" There was a long pause on the other end. I could hear Nathan breathing, probably trying to figure out how to spin this in his favor. I could tell this wasn't exactly what he had expected to hear. "Of course, man," he finally replied. "I get it. I'll respect your boundaries, I promise." I wasn't fully convinced, but I agreed to let him stay for a couple of weeks, just enough time for him to figure things out. I had to keep reminding myself that family was important, and I didn't want to be the person who turned my back on Nathan. But deep down, something told me that this wouldn't be as simple as him just crashing on my couch for a bit. When Nathan arrived, I was already on edge. He showed up with a couple of duffel bags, looking a little worse for wear. His usual confidence was gone. He looked tired, frazzled, and frankly, a little desperate. I tried not to feel bad for him. I did feel bad, but I couldn't let it cloud my judgment. I had my own life to manage, and it wasn't about to become his safety net. We had a quiet dinner that night, just the two of us. At first, it was awkward. Nathan wasn't the type to open up easily about his feelings, and I wasn't about to pry, especially given the tension that was still lingering between us. But slowly, he started talking about the divorce, about Anna, and about how everything had crumbled so quickly. He wasn't the same person he'd been when I last saw him. There was a vulnerability to him that I'd never noticed before. He wasn't just the big loud brother who always had a joke or an opinion. He was human, and I could see how much this was eating away at him. I just didn't see it coming. He said, his voice quieter than usual. "One minute everything was fine, and the next, Anna tells me she wants out. It's like I didn't even know her anymore." I felt for him. I did. But I also knew that I couldn't let my sympathy cloud my judgment. He wasn't the first person to go through a tough breakup, and he wouldn't be the last. I needed to stay strong. The first few days were fine. Nathan kept to himself mostly, staying in his room, leaving only when he had to work or when we shared a meal. But then, as the days wore on, things started to get strange. It started with small things. He'd leave dishes in the sink. Nothing major, but I'd specifically told him I wasn't going to pick up after him. Then I noticed his stuff starting to spread out a bit more. His shoes by the door, a jacket slung over the back of my couch. It wasn't a big deal, but it was starting to feel like he was slowly making himself too comfortable. He was starting to forget the rules I'd set. One afternoon, I came home from work to find him sitting on the couch, looking at his phone. He glanced up at me and said, "I was thinking about going to the store later. You want anything?" "Sure," I said, trying to sound casual. "Just pick up whatever you need." But when I walked into the kitchen, I saw the credit card bill lying on the counter. Nathan's name was right there on the top. A charge for almost $500 from a place I didn't recognize. My stomach dropped. I didn't have to think twice about what this meant. Nathan had already started spending money he didn't have. I walked over, picked up the bill and glanced at the charges. They were mostly from fancy restaurants, the kind of places I knew Anna wouldn't let him go to, at least not without her. "Nathan," I said, holding up the bill. "What is this?" He froze, a look of panic crossing his face. I was going to pay it back," he stammered. "It's just been hard, you know? Getting used to all this." I wasn't thinking clearly. I could feel my anger rising. This wasn't just some accidental slip-up. He'd been racking up charges on my dime, with no plan to pay me back. This wasn't about a family member needing help. This was about Nathan taking advantage of the situation. "Nathan," I said, keeping my voice steady despite the irritation creeping in, "I think you need to leave." His eyes widened. "What? No, Ryan, please. No, you've overstayed your welcome." I cut him off. "This isn't what I agreed to. I don't know how you thought this was going to go, but I'm not going to let you take advantage of me while you're going through your own mess. You need to get your things and figure it out." Nathan didn't argue after that. He gathered his things, and before long, he was gone. I stood there, watching him leave, and for the first time in weeks I felt a sense of relief. It wasn't easy. Kicking out family never is. But I knew I'd made the right decision. Nathan needed to face his problems on his own terms, not by freeloading off me and trying to act like nothing had happened. That night I sat down and thought about everything. The divorce, the tension, the way Nathan had acted like my boundaries didn't matter. In the end, I knew one thing for sure. I wasn't going to let anyone, family included, disrespect me again. It wasn't a happy ending. But it was my ending. And for once, that felt like enough.